So in this video, I am going to try to pick up where I left off at the end of my last video discussing my Arcana for the year 2022, 2020, and 2021. This year for me is the Hanged Man, Arcana 12, last year's Arcana 11, and the year before that, the year of the pandemic. The world-defining year of 2020 is Arcana 10, or the Wheel of Fortune. The Wheel of Fortune, Arcana 10, is the first double digits Arcana which reduces to 1. And interestingly, synchronistically, for me at least, 2020 feels or felt, where still feels like a year of reset, where everything that I had planned up to that point is completely wiped away and wiped clean, and I have to start again. So in a lot of sense, 2020 feels like year 1 or year dot, depending on whether you start with 0 or 1. And it is interesting that my Arcana for that year is also the first Arcana with double digits, which reduces to 1. Arcana 1, the Magician, the Magus, or in older decks, in older cards, he's a street performer. I don't speak French, so I'm going to try to pronounce this properly. Le Battleur, is that how you pronounce it? Which, from what I understand, translates to a street performer. Now, a street performer isn't as noble as a magician, but if you look at the Montaigne deck, which I will not call a tarot, a deck of 50 cards, I believe based on the Neoplatonic worldview of the European Old World late antiquities. No, actually, no. It's the 1400s or 1500s, I think. So it's around the Renaissance. You see that the succession of the stages of the human person started with someone called the Miserable, I believe, which is kind of more or less the equivalent of the Fool. And the next one is a depiction of what looks like a page in our modern depiction of the variety of images in tarot. Somebody who served others for a living. And then the next one up is the craftsman who utilizes the depiction is of a male presenting person, of his creative skills to take care of not only himself but also others. And in the first instance, the Miserable or the Fool, I suppose the Miserable and the Fool is not quite the same. The Fool has this air of wisdom about him, but the Miserable in the Montaigne deck definitely looks quite destitute. He seems to be relying on other people to do what is right, to do what is compassionate, to do what is decent, while the second one up, he is relying on his own initiative to take care of himself. By serving others, others will pay him something in return. He obtained resources by initiative. And then further up, it's not only initiative, but by providing others with resources through the possession of skills. So now the resources isn't out there, the resources is within the self. And the consensus, I suppose, for a lot of people, this particular craftsperson, this card number 3 in the Montaigne deck, is the more or less equivalent of the magician in the system that we understand. And I want to go back to the street performer. Although he's less noble, he is too providing skills, initiating his own attainment of resources, initiating taking care of himself or herself or themselves through the utilization of skills. with all the tools in front of him on his table. So the last time we talked about the magician, I mentioned seeds, I mentioned materialization. I can't remember if I mentioned initiation, but if I think about the magician, they are the person or the entity or the point in our journey. I'm going to stop referring to these mysteries like a person. They are depicted as a person, as persons, in a way that deities often are depicted as humans, so that we can relate to them, so that we can understand them, because we're ants. If we are ants and we want to understand the sky will have to talk ant language, I suppose, for an ant to understand, I suppose. I know that's a really sloppy metaphor, but there you go. So the magician is the point, the mystery of the magician, the mystery of number one is this point of initiation, is this seedling, is a pot of seed that is starting to sprout. And last time I talked to you in the last video, I showed some images from the Nomad Tarot where the aces of the suits are not just one thing, it's depicted as many things of that suit. So it depicts perfectly in my mind my understanding that within the aces, within Arcana 1, contained within it is the whole of the suit, is the whole of the arcana, is the whole of the mysteries, is the whole of the element. Within the one seed, contained within it is the whole of the plant, from the trunks to the branches to the leaves to the fruit. And tying it back to the Wheel of Fortune, which is Arcana 10, I mentioned the Taoist Priest and all the rituals and all the traditions, which is equivalent to the Western world's magic, I suppose. The Taoist Priest is really the superhero in a lot of stories that I read in graphic novels or movies or TV series in the past, imported from Hong Kong via illegal copies on Betamax. We're talking the 70s here in Indonesia. Well, the 70s and 80s really, at the height of the Hong Kong movie industry. It's really sad to see what happened to Hong Kong after 97, but that's a whole different conversation. The Taoist priest is always the superhero, this magician. So, with regards to the Wheel of Fortune, the magician becomes such an apt, numerologically speaking. And so the fact that it reduces to the magician, it's so synchronistic to me. The fact that the Wheel of Fortune, as something that we have the power to negotiate with our own two hands, with our own God-given skills and intellect and ability to think and ability to ponder, and our ability to try to elevate ourselves beyond the physical into the metaphysical, is completely embodied in the magician, represented in my own mental mind as this Taoist priest, in my own lived experiences and reality as the Taoist priest who will come and help you intervene with, negotiate with destiny. I think I've mentioned this before, but during a wedding in Bali, a wedding celebration in Bali, which we organized for my sister, we use what we call a pawang hujan, which is someone, again, I'm not going to try to translate the words into English, because when you translate it, you lose the meaning. Pawang hujan, the closest translation would be the rain whisperer, but it doesn't even come close. So we don't pay them fee, they don't sell. What we do is that we seek their assistance with humility, and in response, we humbly offer an offering of a small amount of envelope, money in an envelope, which we hope we can contribute to their living expenses and their quality of life so that they can continue to do the work for humanity, for us. And the amount is never specified but understood. So we have to consult with the people at large, the community, about what is acceptable, what is an honorable offering, so that they can set that time and they can set that their body, their mind, and their spirit, because they have to fast, they have to pray, they have to take a lot of time so that they can help us with ensuring, I forgot to tell you, that it doesn't rain that day, because the reception, the party is outdoors. And there's a lot of outdoors events in Bali. It is Pulau Dewata. It is the island of the gods. She came in all white, and she sat with us throughout the reception. And she had to fast. And she's not actually the pawang. Her husband is the pawang hujan. But because her husband had to be elsewhere, she came as a proxy to her husband. She's dressed all in white in a traditional Balinese outfit, which is actually very much influenced by a Javanese outfit. And she sat there, and I've spoken a little bit about how we do things in the old country. Spiritual business is an oxymoron. Spiritual commerce is an oxymoron, because it isn't done for the money. It shouldn't be done for the money. That's a completely different video I will do next time. Here I want to focus on the magician. And so I moved to Arcana 11 for 2021, which is last year at the time of the making of this video. Which is Arcana 11 is fortitude or justice. And as I've mentioned, for me, after the pandemic, it was very clear that Arcana 11 for me, 2021, is clearly more about fortitude than it is about justice, although all arcanas, all mysteries are related. And this restraint, this humility and the restraint, the controlling over our bodily and our more base functions and instincts and knee-jerk reactions in how the Pawang Hujan works, sitting there quietly all night while we're having the party, having to fast, having to pray, having to cleanse herself and himself, because she's there on behalf of her husband, having to wear all white, stripping herself of every color and every flare. It reminds me very much of fortitude. And the one image that stuck with me is Crowley's Thoth, done the image by Frida Harris, which keyword is lust, and I could never understand. And note that because these are personal reflections, they are experiential in nature, so I haven't read any esoteric books or anything, or any tarot guidebook, but the image of a woman riding this multi-faced lion in the color of fire, and the keyword lust. Lust for me is not limited to sexual desire. It is all desire of the flesh, including desire to be satisfied in anger, desire to be satisfied in justice or feeling of justice, the desire to be satisfied in the flesh instead of in the spirit. In my case, it's desire for nice things, for nice experiences, for comfort. That's all desire of the flesh. Taking the path of least resistance, for example. So, not only is it tied very closely to the magician in terms of having control over destiny, but it is also doing so with the awareness of the weakness of the flesh, and therefore the humility and the self-awareness that we are only but a small, tiny fraction of the universe. And if we are going to petition God, the universe, goddesses, gods, however your belief system construct this or these higher powers or higher power, then it must be done without the arrogance of thinking that you could ever be equal to these forces. And that to me is part of the year 11, Mystery 11, Arcana 11 of Fortitude. It was a very difficult year for me, 2021, because it was that aftermath of 2020. It is when you suddenly realize things are bad. 2020, it was such, your head spins. You do not know which way is up, which way is down. And 2021 felt like the year that you finally see how topsy-turvy life is and how things will never return to the way they were, and how everything you worked for up to then has been taken so far off course that you have to start again, and you just don't know how. And it relates to the Hanged Man, Arcana and Mystery 12, 1 and 2, reduces to 3, the High Priestess, La Papessa, or the Popess, which I will talk about in a separate video. To me, she is the gateway between this world and the world beyond. The world that is material into the immaterial. And this year, as I'm hanged upside down and I'm reminded that I'm trapped, like a couple of you said in my last video, thank you so much for that, because that really have provided me with a different perspective that is absolutely useful, that I will carry with me for the rest of 2022. Instead of rebelling, confronting, fighting like a wounded animal, which is another apt metaphor for our more fleshly, our more base nature, our knee-jerk reaction is to fight when you're trapped. And with the strength of Arcana 11, you rise above that, and you know that the way out is not by brute strength, but by calming yourself down and refocusing the self towards the immaterial, towards the bigger things, the higher things. Which is what the Popess, La Papessa, and the High Priestess is about for me. She is the yin gateway between the material world into the immaterial for me. And so the Magician in 2020, Fortitude, and the High Priestess and La Papessa, maybe that's Pope Joan, maybe that's Mother Church, who knows? Again, I'll speak about that in a different video, in my next video, for 2021. And for 2022, the Hanged Man and the Empress, the yin gateway between the immaterial into the material. And now that you have regained the control over your flesh and focus on the higher things that we are all a part of, the Magician who initiated materialization is then allowed to cross that gateway into materialization through the Empress this year in 2022. And the Hanged Man, the serene Hanged Man this time. I started with a struggling, agonized hangman in my last video, and in this video I feel like I'm finally, after I reflect with not only the Wheel of Fortune but also the Magician, not only Fortitude but also La Papessa, not only the Hangman but also the Empress, I'm finally understanding how I can get to the serene hangman with the halo around their head, hanging upside down in composure, as if by choice. So I'll leave it there, and in my next video, I'll talk about Arcana 2, Mystery 2, High Priestess, La Papessa, in relation to Fortitude, and the Empress in relation to this year, Arcana, the Hanged Man, Arcana 12, and greater details. I'll talk to you then.